Welcome to DeProgram. I'm Michelle Witte. I'm here with John Kiriakou and Ted Rall. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello.
How you doing? Welcome to your late lunchtime
Yeah.
deprogramming.
Sorry, Mitchell.
Yeah.
It's lunar.
Yes. It's tea. I'm here to report that apparently the New York Times has joined us in deprogramming because they have, hold on to your hats, discovered the secret history. Let me read the headline here, actually. It is the secret history of the war in Ukraine. The untold story of America's hidden role in the Ukrainian military operations against Russia's invading armies. I don't know.
Times is on it.
I feel like this has got to be a secret to exclusively New York Times readers, I guess. Because I couldn't find, I guess there was a little bit of detail about maybe a little more detail about the presence of British troops in Ukraine early on. I do have a question about one of those things, but basically it's like, yeah, Americans and Ukrainians and other members of NATO ultimately were helping plan strikes, providing all the intelligence. You know what I mean? They had their hand over Ukraine's little hand and were swinging the golf putter for them. Was anything in here a surprise to any of you?
Nope.
No. It was disingenuous of the New York Times to even publish something like this. It's like they just realized after 11 years, wait a minute, there's actually a history to this conflict.
Yeah.
They should be ashamed of themselves.
And of course, I think this story starts essentially in 2022. Yeah. So it's not it's not going back to 2014. It's not talking about, but the American involvement. But it is crazy to pretend that this is a revelation. Really at all. And it wasn't only, the people that we were speaking to, on Sputnik. It wasn't like only Mark Sloboda, the political analyst who was providing this information. CBS had elements of this story. Like this was simply available. It's mind-boggling to me to call it secret. I guess they're giving us the names of people, and giving us snippets of their conversations in Germany as they're doing this planning together. But it does fit a pattern, I will say, with the New York Times of brooking no dissent in the run-up to a war and in the early stages of a war, right? When it might matter, when dissenting voices might make a difference. And then belatedly, deciding, okay, now it's safe enough for us to report on, for example, a big splash they made a few years back with reporting on a rogue American battalion in Syria, allegedly committing war crimes. This kind of thing. Once it's all under the bridge, once it's over, right? Once we've retreated from Afghanistan, we can talk about how we were actually losing the war there for 18 years straight. It's just incredible that they have the cheek to do this.
Back in the 80s, the punk band, the Dead Kennedys, had a song lyric that said, in 10 years or so, they'll leak the truth, but by then, it's only so much paper.
Yes.
And that's exactly what it is.
It's exactly.
Absolutely true. That is absolutely true.
I do have a question. So early on in this story, because it's a big splashy special, it's very very and they're trying to do cloak and dagger stuff. And so it starts out with this story of how these two Ukrainian generals are spirited out of Ukraine to Germany to meet with American counterparts and talk about war planning. And it says, 2 months after Russia invades Ukraine, a convoy manned by British commandos out of uniform but heavily armed. They grabbed up these two Ukrainian generals who were not kidnapped. They were wanting to go, and then took them, over the Polish border, crossed over, brought them to Germany. Sorry, it seems reckless to have plainclothes active British commandos heavily armed in a potential war zone. Right? Or am I nuts? Right? Doesn't that seem like I don't know, minimum reckless, maybe breaking a variety of rules? I'm not totally up on like
definitely breaking
rules of war, but like
definitely breaking rules. Yeah, no, this is John's expertise, and I want to hear what John has to say. It does seem like the kind of thing. It's like it's the regular military engaging in covert activities.
Yeah.
Right. And that's they're not supposed to.
And presumably, since they were armed, prepared to fire upon Russian soldiers if they were attacked.
Which would be an act of war committed by NATO against Russia.
It would be framed that way at all.
No. It would not be framed that way. But this is exactly why so much more thought needs to go into what kind of commitment the West is going to make. Is it really worth the risk of going to war with Russia? It would be World War III. And I'm not overstating it, but it would be World War III if it were to become a war between Russia and NATO.
No, and I want to point out that it is a recurring theme. This sort of recklessness is a recurring theme in this story, because there's another line where they're talking about Ukraine's request of HIMARS, right? And this idea, from covering the war, we all know every 4 or 5 months, there would be like a new piece of technology that was going to be the game changer, and it's this thing and it's that thing, and it's going to be a game changer for Ukraine. But oh dear, is it a red line?
HIMARS are for people who don't know.
Right.
Go for it, guys. With the HIMARS.
Missiles.
Thank you.
What do I know? I never paid attention in the military briefings.
They're a high mobility artillery rocket system. So you wheel them around. They offer the firepower of a MLRS on a truck chassis. Yes. So it can fire missiles guided missiles 50 miles. You can move them around. So they're supposed to be this great game changer. And
those are the missiles that you see in overhead photography, where they're like hidden among trees, or they'll have camouflage nets over it.
There's a big box.
It's a big box, and they can be moved like right to the Russian border. Yes. And then fired up to 50 miles there.
So they finally there's a debate about whether the West, the United States, should provide these HIMARS. And there's a quote in the story from an official who isn't named, who says, as they're waiting for President Biden at the time to decide whether he's going to allow the use of these things, the official says, it felt like standing on that line, wondering, if you take a step forward, is World War III going to break out? And again, there's not a lot of reflection in here as to, wait a minute, if we are standing on this line and World War II might break out because we give Ukraine this particular type of missile, is this worth it? Right? Is this border worth it? Is this fight that we have, of course, provoked and long been waiting for? But this is what you want to start World War III over? For sure.
Exactly.
And how would the American people feel about that?
Yeah.
Well, they don't know. The American people are not told,
Yes.
Yeah. And this is sort of the recurring theme, right? This comes up in this, the Signalgate chat that we were talking about when discussing Yemen. There's a lot of discussion about the sort of details and the fringes of these conversations, but there's very little thoughtful, deliberate discussion about actually using the way we use war, what ends we are going toward, why we continue to use war as a means to those ends. Do we want to actually do this thing? Not how do we do it, and who said what about it, and whatever. And there seemed to be sort of precious little discussion, or input collected from, as you say, Ted, the American population, as to whether they would like to risk World War III to give Ukraine HIMARS.
Mm-hmm.
It's very. It's disturbing, right? I think in the end, what it boils down to is, they think they're the boss, And I think we're the boss, right? I mean, if I were the president of the United States, I'd be very, very reluctant to engage in any military action until after I'd gone on television several times to fully explain what I intended to do and why, and then saw some polls and saw how people reacted to it. I would just feel like it's not my place. Yeah. But that's just not how things are.
Yeah. No. So, of course, we learn, that the United States is making personnel decisions. There's a moment where they insist that some particular general be fired because he's not going to do what the U.S. wants him to do. But basically, this is just, if you were reading anything but the New York Times, you would have had a sense of this already, that, of course, the United States has been deeply, deeply involved in not just slapping Ukrainians on the back and providing them with technology, but collecting the intelligence used, that technology is used for, providing that intelligence, training them on the weapons, giving them targets.
Mainly, that seems to be the big one, right? I mean, it seems like if I had to just pick out one thing from that article, it's kind of like, well, these guys wouldn't know what to aim at, and we told them. And that's a huge thing. Yeah.
But that was known before this, it just wasn't widely reported on. But we would talk to people and say, Ukraine doesn't know how to use these weapons. Ukraine doesn't have this intelligence gathering capability.
May I ask a question? First of all, to answer one of our viewers in the chat, Mike, I apologize that I can't join the chat because I would have to get out of StreamYard. So I want to answer your question, and Brian has a question. So I'm not lurking in the chat, but I want to address this. Brian says Russia has moved the line you can't cross so many times. I find it hard to believe anyone was actually concerned HIMARS was going to be the last straw. That is a really important point. But what that tells me is that the Russians are far more flexible than the West is. Like, the Russians could have said, look, we've got this red line here, and by God, if you cross it, all hell's going to break loose. If you provide HIMARS to the Ukrainians, look out, we're going to start killing everybody. But they didn't do that. They didn't say that.
Well, the U.S., Americans have a tendency to view flexibility as weakness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Russians see it as what's the word?
Pragmatic?
Yeah, pragmatism. That's the best word for it. Sure, it's pragmatism. Okay, a HIMARS is launched. It hits an apartment building outside of Moscow. That's terrible. That's an act of war. Of course, it's an attack on civilians. But then the Russians don't necessarily respond to it. And I think that is a far bigger, far better policy than pushing, and tempting the start of World War III.
Well, because Russia doesn't want to be at war with NATO any more than it already is at war with NATO in this, what we can, I guess, now call a proxy war, which we all got laid off for saying basically for a couple of years.
It was in the article, officially.
Yeah. Which also, I feel like, belies this supposed European fear that first Ukraine, then the rest of Europe, that Russian armies are going to march across the continent. The only thing holding them back is, I don't know, fear of American nukes or something.
They could have invaded Ukraine anytime they wanted. I mean, it was just sitting there. It would have been easier before. They didn't.
Yeah.
I think, I really, obviously I'm not in President Putin or his generals' minds, in their brains, but I think that the reason they didn't want Ukraine to join NATO is very simple. It's like, we all know there can be drunken border guards can just start shooting at each other at 3:00 in the morning. It actually happens all the time among the former Soviet Central Asian republics. It happened in Kashmir between Chinese troops and Pakistani troops recently, right? It just people get bored, and so it's like the next thing Article 5 is triggered, and you're at World War III because 3 dinguses tied on too much vodka one night. I mean, that's what Putin's worried about.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
that's exactly what he's worried about. What do you make of Trump's complaint about Putin yesterday? That he said Putin is really pissing me off. That was the quote. because he made a personal swipe at Zelensky and hasn't offered up enough incentives for the Ukrainians to go to the table. Should we take that seriously?
I think basically what happened here is there is some sense that the Russians might be taking too long and that they might be dragging their feet. But I think also, and so I think this is for domestic internal Oval Office consumption, where he's being advised by the people around him, that you can't trust Putin, you can't trust the Russians, you've got to be hard. And so also it kind of is a sop to the Ukrainians. Like, look, what did he tell Zelensky? This is not, I'm in between. I'm not on your side. I'm not on Russia's side. I'm on the side of peace. That's what he said in that famous blow up, right, in the Oval Office. I think this is part of that thing. It's like, okay, I don't want everyone to think now I'm on Russia's side. I'm not on Russia's side either. I'm trying to broker a deal so both of you two knuckleheads cut it out, quit saying disrespectful, mean shit about each other. You're going to have to make peace. You're going to have to shake hands. You're going to have to be nice to each other. I really think in the end, that's what he thinks he's doing.
I mean, I think it's also the U.S. has a tendency to forget that other countries do have strategic interests and goals. And Trump thought, maybe he was going to come in. It's one thing to get Ukraine to acquiesce to your demands because we are 100% supplying and directing their war effort.
They're a wholly owned subsidiary.
Yeah. Russia's not. And Russia is winning. You know what I mean? Like, we would talk to people in the past who would...
And they have more at stake, too.
Yeah, well, they do. They have a lot at stake. They've reconfigured their economy. The entire sort of geopolitical balance of the world has shifted as a result of this. You know what I mean? Like the increasing closeness with China. You can't throw it away. The United States is going to try and drive a wedge between you and China, right? And so, and they've also spent a lot on this effort. They've lost a lot in blood and treasure. And I think that the United States generally, and I think the Trump administration maybe particularly, does tend to forget that you're not just dealing with pieces on a board, right? And we heard people predict for a long time that this war was not going to be over quickly, and that when Russia is winning, Russia's not necessarily that motivated to stop, except on its terms. Like, just because the U.S. has come in and is bullying around its vassal Ukraine doesn't mean that what Russia wants has necessarily changed, or that it's going to decide to have spent all of this money and these lives to not get exactly what it wants.
Well, yeah, and if you're Putin and Donald Trump is opposed to continued, blank checks for Ukraine, you think that you would have an incentive to continue the war, right? Just bleed the Ukrainians until they just give up. They can't fight anymore.
And the summer's beginning now. I mean, that's only going to help the Russians at this stage. It just seems like there's a my train of thought is gone. Go ahead, Michelle.
No, I mean, that's it. I think that, in the same way.
What I was going to say.
Go ahead, Ted.
Oh, so it reminded me there was an open mic gaffe. I think it was with Obama and some other world leader, and Obama just says like, "Hey, listen, I'm going to have to beat you up a little bit, but don't worry, we're good." If you remember that, and I think this is kind of like I suspect I would like to think that Trump would call Putin and just say, "Listen, you got to give me something. You got to give me something." That I can take back and say, and just otherwise I lose face. I can't have that. I can't be seen as having gotten my ass kicked. So what are you going to give me? I think this is a little bit about that.
I mean, we'll see.
I think so too.
Do you guys want to hear something else that the New York Times has just discovered? This is just...
there's a Twitter feed called The Times is on it, which is only about things that they come to really late.
That's great. I follow the pitch bot, which is pretty funny, but no, not that one. The Times has recently discovered that despite the fact that in its headline, America has never been wealthier, it doesn't feel that way. And guys, would you know it? household net worth reached a new peak at the end of 2024. The unemployment rate is just above record lows. Debt compared to assets that households are carrying are near a record low. But even a land of plenty has its shortcomings, influencing both perceptions and realities of how Americans are doing. The economy remains deeply unequal, blah, blah, blah. Data designed to capture the overall population may be obscuring the challenges experienced by a broad range of Americans. So this is just another, like, weird, guys. The economy looks great, and yet many people are unhappy. And so it's another, discovery that actually the people who are driving this economy are about, 15 dudes in one party bus, 15 dudes in quarter zip fleeces in one party bus driving around while everybody else literally is becoming homeless, living in the streets. And again, never any comments on how the terrible shame of having low unemployment and poverty. Everyone just says, look, unemployment's low, so it's totally fine.
The low unemployment's not really low, right? I mean,
that's right.
Those numbers have been jiggered so many times, it's ridiculous. Unemployment is, really, I would argue the unemployment rate is about 35%. The participation rate in the economy is only about 65%. So that means 35% of people just don't vote, don't work, don't try to work, don't think they can get a job. You're counted as fully employed if you work 1 hour a week. Those numbers are fake as shit. There's no metric for underemployment. Someone who has a master's degree and is driving an Uber,
this is what I mean.
They're considered to be rocking it. They're living the dream.
Yeah.
And Ronald Reagan changed the numbers so that they now include the military as being full-time employed.
Mm-hmm. Listen to this. The share of wealth held by families in the top 10% has reached 69%. While the share held by families in the bottom 50 is only 60%. This is according to the Congressional Budget Office. So yeah, weird how people are so, there's so much discontent. Bizarre. Anyway, this is another thing that the Times has just discovered.
It's not that shocking that the Times, where you can't get hired unless you went to some place like Columbia Journalism School and gotten a master's degree, and they don't offer financial aid. So they only employ rich kids.
Wow,
that's all they have. So they don't know anyone poor.
Yeah.
Wow.
Even that.
It's ugly.
Yeah. You know what, though? It's coming for all of us, right? You're not making that much money as a,
I want to give the Times some credit, though. It is a newspaper, right? So just because a story ran, like, say, 15 years ago, doesn't mean that it shouldn't be revisited, from time to time.
Oh, so no.
I want to say it's a good thing that they are talking about the same place that has, more Tiffany's ads than any place else in the world. It's they're sort of waking up. It's just that the problem is that, the same exact newspaper won't cover, like, when a Democratic candidate comes along who actually cares about these issues. They kneecap him and they don't, and they make sure he gets no coverage whatsoever.
No, I think this story should be front page of every newspaper every day, right? But it is very, the way that they present it, right? Data designed to capture the overall population may be obscuring challenges experienced by a broad range of Americans. Yeah, look at fucking Paul Krugman, and you know what I mean? Like, go take a look at your own opinion. Your roster of opinion columnists, New York Times.
Drive across the country. My son grew up in the Hamptons. That's where we lived at the time. And He was like, "We're poor." I'm like, "Dude, we have a pool. We own $1 million house." And so I was like, "Get in the car. I'll show." Like, we're going to go on a road trip. I was like, "This is how most people live. Not some people, not a lot of people. Most Americans live in grinding poverty."
Yeah. Yes. I just thought it was funny that they were discovering that maybe their data is giving them an incomplete picture of the U.S. economy. Again, they are a newspaper. You should be running this all the time, but it's not. There's no may. It definitely is. That's what I think bothers me. Right? If your data is showing you a picture of a prosperous country where where everyone has the opportunity to live a full life, then yes, that data is definitely obscuring reality, and you should be looking to different data. Don't pretend that there's a maybe here.
And it does help to explain things that Times readers wonder about, namely, how did Donald Trump get elected twice?
Yes. And is he going to get elected a third time?
Yeah. I've had several conversations about that with Bruce Fine. And it was covered extensively in today's Washington Post as well.
You want to explain who Bruce Fine is?
I'm sorry. Bruce Fine is the former Deputy Attorney General of the United States, and he's a Washington-based attorney, constitutional scholar, Harvard Law and Berkeley. He knows these issues very deeply. And he said, look, the founding fathers, not even the founding fathers, is the 22nd Amendment. The drafters of the 22nd Amendment could not possibly have made it any more crystal clear that you cannot run for a third term, period. Mm-hmm. It's in stone. Trump said yesterday that, well, there are ways around it. And he said, there's a little wiggle room there. No, there are no ways around it. There's no wiggle room. You can't run for a third term.
Well, John Dean did say you could run. There's the Medvedev approach, right? You run, you get your cat to run for president. You run for vice president, and then
that's what George
your cat
Wallace
steps
did.
Aside, right?
Yeah, that's what George Wallace did in Alabama. He was term limited as governor. He had already been governor for 2 terms. So his wife ran for governor, and she got elected, but he was essentially the governor. He was the lieutenant governor, and then she resigned, and he became governor again.
That's crazy.
And that's how
I love that.
How he got around.
So it would work, right? Assuming that you got elected.
I just can't imagine that the Supreme Court would allow this. I can't imagine it.
But who
knows?
I don't think the language prevents it. It doesn't. The 22nd Amendment doesn't say, you can't run for vice president. I mean,
no. But then I wonder if
Hillary Clinton considered having Bill Clinton run as her vice president in 2016.
God.
Yeah, but then in the case of a death or resignation,
you're president.
I wonder if they would skip over you constitutionally.
Well, you wouldn't have run. It says no one can run for president twice. But you wouldn't have run for president.
This is
I think
I
think the Supreme Court would let it go.
The other thing, I gotta say, like the amount of time and ink being spent on this. I mean, I know on one hand that Donald Trump is doing some, singularly disturbing things and is clearly, ready for a real constitutional challenge. But part of me also thinks that a lot of the media just want it to be election cycle 24/7. Never cover anything else. Just do will he or won't he, is she or isn't she stuff about who's running for office, and then just cover a fucking horse race that never ends, And so now it's March. It's
What happened?
I hope we haven't. I don't know. It looks like we've lost Michelle. Maybe she's had a power outage or something.
Oh man,
that happened to me once when we were doing our show. I had a power outage. And that was, she's back.
Michelle, you're back. You just froze for about 8 seconds.
Yeah, I guess I'm plugged in, so I guess we can all blame Xfinity.
You've been sounding pretty good so far. Keep going.
But that's part of what I feel like is the draw to this. There's a lot else that's going on right now. There's a lot of reporting you could do, I feel like, that would ensure that Donald Trump is not going to be successful regardless of whether he attempts to run. But they just love an election. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's where the clicks are. That's where the ratings are.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know that I think the odds of Donald Trump being alive to run when he's 86 years old are actuarially slim. I think the odds of him being lucid enough to run are even slimmer.
And I wonder how many
he may not even want it.
And how many up and coming Republicans are going to say, wait a minute. You've had your turn. Now it's my turn. I'm going to run.
Oh, nobody.
You don't
I would say I'm not sure about it. Depends on how popular Trump is, because there have been a lot.
Years.
Whose turn would it even be, except for like maybe JD Vance's, I guess, depending on this stint. Like there's not a Democrat. Who?
DeSantis, Rubio.
DeSantis, I don't think DeSantis can win.
No,
he's so fucking genuinely weird and off-putting.
True.
Marco Rubio, maybe, right? maybe he's going to decide that, he wants his turn. But Rubio's not like
Yeah, but he's got a face for radio, that guy. I don't see how.
Well, he also doesn't have it's not like Trump's base likes Rubio. So it kind of depends on what is the Republican Party. Is it still this one? Because they're tolerating him right now. And he's been, pretty quiet.
Well, I mean, I think Trumpism, I don't know if the Republican Party, let's say Trump dies. I don't know if the Republican Party I don't know if MAGA world stays in the Republican Party. I mean, because Trump took it over using MAGA, but MAGA needs to be organized in order to keep hold of the, the country club Republicans they want to get it back. Yeah. And they'll take it back.
They want it back. Yeah, they will.
They're just waiting.
It's funny too. There are still some neocon elements that bubble to the surface every once in a while. The Tea Party, Ted, was the same way. They were an honest God movement, and then they kind of just went away. I mean, there are a dozen or 2 dozen of them in the House caucus, the Republican caucus, but they're not what they were in 2009. That's for sure. 2010. I wonder if the same thing is going to happen to the MAGA people.
Yeah, I do feel like it's almost like how, Francois Macron has his own personal party, and it will disappear along with him when he leaves office.
Because there's no,
or Zelensky.
Yeah.
There's nothing if these tariffs drive prices up, if Dr. Oz is allowed to totally get rid of Medicare and make it all Medicare Advantage, right? If all of these state cuts, these state Medicaid cuts go through, people are thrown off their benefits. There's a big chunk of people who I think were moved by Donald Trump's message the first time around and the second time around, who are pretty dramatically getting left behind now by this new sort of Trump X Elon Musk X Peter Thiel, whatever, to use a parlance that I hate. And yeah, they're not going to come and I don't know. There was some particular mystique about Donald Trump that they believed him, right? For some reason, they believed him a little bit, but the
Michelle,
traditional
I got to push back hard against
Republican Party is not. They're not going to stick with them.
You're giving us the Thomas Frank "What's the matter with Kansas" argument, right? Which is that it assumes that people vote along for their interests. I don't think they do. I don't, and liberals don't vote for their interests. If they did, they'd probably vote. Liberals tend to be pretty rich, and they would probably vote Republican to get their taxes cut. Their values say they're willing to pay more taxes. Conversely, I think people who are in flyover country who vote Republican, and this is not, a Trump thing. This is a Republican thing. It was true under Reagan and Bush as well. Even though they get screwed, they lose benefits, their schools get shittier because of funding cuts. They'll keep voting Republican because it's their identity. Their identity is I'm Republican. This is my religion. In the same way that Democrats be voting Democratic no matter what. That's because it
depends on the level of people, the amount of activation you need, I suppose, right? You're going to have people who are just going to, fade back into the bushes, Sean Spicer style, who are going to, walk back out of electoral politics and say, gave it a shot and it didn't work. But yes, people are not totally rational in how they vote. And also maybe we're underestimating. I think I said this the last time we spoke. I am a little bit surprised at how much racial and cultural grievance is at the forefront of this administration, with wanting to, tinker around with the Kennedy Center and change what the Smithsonian presentation ship looks like. But that's what they
think it's funny
doing. Yeah.
For them, that's part of the trolling. But I'll tell you what MAGA world is absolutely ecstatic about is the deportations, and including the deportations of kids, college kids. They're fuck those elite Ivy League grad student, effete, foreign bastards. Fuck them, deport them all, jail them. They hate them. And that part of that nativism is powerful. That's a huge, that's where policy really hits the sweet spot, I think, with those people.
May I add something too? Sasha Vukovic, one of our viewers, raises something that's important, I think, that I saw earlier today. Oliver Stone, he put this on Twitter, he put it on Facebook, he put it everywhere, all of his social media, that he's so disappointed in this administration because there has been no change in the Biden administration's policy of bombing Yemen and bombing Ukraine and supplying and allowing Israel to continue bombing Gaza and massacring civilians. There's been no change. There's no difference now than what there was a year ago under Joe Biden. Why is that? If this is supposed to be a hands-off MAGA foreign policy, why is it Joe Biden's foreign policy?
Well, we knew the Israel thing would continue.
Yeah. He was clear
there was never any doubt
about Israel.
And he did cut back some of the weapons to Ukraine.
Yeah, but it hasn't.
By the way, I can't believe we're talking about Gaza if we don't talk about the aid workers who were found, in a mass grave. 15
aid workers in a mass grave, first responders.
Yeah.
15.
The IDF attacked their convoy of fire engines and ambulances, claimed they didn't know what they were, which is just not credible, and then killed them all and then buried them in a mass grave. Probably would have never heard of it if witnesses hadn't spoken up, and then they got disinterred. And now, it's almost up to World Food Kitchen levels of anger.
Yeah.
But I guess nothing will happen. But it is a war crime.
Yeah,
it's
another one.
Definitely a war crime. Definitely.
Another tick on that side of the ledger.
Yeah.
But a lot of strange evangelical MAGA people, anything for Israel, because they're going to bring about the end times.
Fucking insane.
Did you see this? This speaker was canceled at NYU yesterday because she had sent in her PowerPoint slides in advance, and one of them talked about these massacres in Gaza, and they said, "Oh, that sounds anti-Semitic." And then there was another thing, where she was complaining about how cutting USAID is hampering the development of legitimate infrastructure overseas. And they said, "Oh, that sounds anti-governmental," and so they just canceled her speech. That's where we are now.
I don't know which one is more upsetting, honestly. I mean, the anti-Semitism one is one we've been dealing with for a while. But yeah, now you can't say, whatever. In my opinion, cutting USAID is going to, if you can't say something that is critical of the actions of the administration, what are you doing? What are you doing as a university? But I mean, we know what they're doing, right?
I was asked yesterday to speak to the Canadian Foreign Ministry. Now, mind you, I am banned from Canada for the rest of my life.
It's a trap, John. They're trying to get you to show up.
Why?
I don't know what to make of this.
You'll be Khashoggi'd.
Yeah. They said, we could do it over Zoom. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Fuck you. I'm not talking to you if I'm not allowed in the country.
Why are you not? Why are you banned from the Great White North?
Oh, because I'm a dangerous national security criminal.
Oh, right.
Oh, right. Yeah. We keep forgetting.
Yeah.
So I went and looked up Oliver Stone's tweet because I was curious. And I once again have to raise a question. He asks, why doesn't Trump at least meet with the Iranian leaders as he did North Korea's? Yeah. And so, of course, over the weekend, we had more sort of bombast. Trump saying, we're going to bomb Iran if unless you make a new deal with us, which is fucking hilarious, right? Considering you tore up the last one, but fine. However, I have been seeing, I've been seeing sort of reporting, citing different anonymous sources that the Iranians are actually, the Iranian government has authorized its members to make overtures to the Americans, that Iran actually is willing to talk. And also, again, it does not seem to me that hyperbolic threats from Trump preclude a willingness to negotiate. You know what I mean? That maybe they are
correct.
actually an indication that negotiations are imminent or even underway. And so I wonder, I mean, who knows what will happen, right? Because Trump has been very antagonistic toward Iran, of course, assassinated Qasem Soleimani. I'm not ignoring any of that. But weirdly, still seems like that is one area where maybe there is some progress that's going to be made that is peaceful, despite the fact that Donald Trump has been making these threats. I don't know. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws.
Well, the reason why, Trump's not talking to Iran. I mean, why.
Israel?
Yeah.
Yeah, but, maybe he's letting them do whatever they want to do, exercise their most disgusting and base urges in Gaza while he, comes to another deal with Iran. I mean,
Israel is maximalist. They want everything.
Yeah.
That's all. They don't, there's no 99% is not enough for them.
Yeah.
They don't settle for anything less than an even 100.
Yeah, I do wonder.
And Iran,
I wonder.
The Israelis have always had a hard on for Iran. So, they I think they probably would. I think if they had to choose between getting rid of, if they had to choose between annexing Gaza and the West Bank versus taking out and destroying Iran, they would probably get rid of Iran. They'd probably pick that. They care about it a lot.
They didn't get it. The last time Trump was in power with John Bolton as, was he the NSC?
Yeah, he was the National Security Advisor.
National Security Advisor with Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State. If that wasn't the administration that actually bombed Iran, I don't know. I mean, Rubio, maybe. Witkoff, unknown quantity. J.D. Vance is a dickhead, but has, the occasional, has some correct instincts on foreign policy sometimes. I don't know. I wonder. I mean, I'll see. I could be totally wrong. It could just be a prelude to, the war that Israel has always wanted.
Yeah.
Well, that would be, of course, now that's World War III.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be World War III.
And I have to think there are enough members of the Joint Chiefs who are aware of that and who would speak up so that that's what's keeping us from DFS. It was
always my experience when I was at the CIA that the group that was the most anti-war in these principals committee meetings were the Joint Chiefs. And it was the State Department that always wanted to just bomb everybody.
Talk about ass backwards. It's so bizarre.
There was an interesting piece in the Post today about the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who for the very first time ever is a 3-star general, not a 4-star general. And he's the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs to never lead one of the services. So a group of 4-stars, I guess, pulled him aside and said, listen, you little shit. You're only 56. You're too young for this job. You don't have any of the experience. Did you campaign for it? Because apparently it's considered to be very bad form to campaign for the position of chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You just hope to be noticed by the president and he chooses you. Mm-hmm. And he said that not only was he not campaigning for it, but he considered turning it down because he's never gotten his 4th star. And they said that was good enough with them. He'll probably get his 4th star now that he's taken the job. He'll have to be approved by the Senate, and he's going to be the guy now. I didn't even recognize his name. I don't even remember it now. I'd have to look at the.
No, I don't know who any of them are.
These guys, they're so interchangeable. I mean,
Oh,
Eisenhower and Patton, they are not.
No, exactly right. Exactly right.
Do we want to talk about France before we get out of here? You want to talk about Marine? So Marine Le Pen, head of, it was the National Rally. Is it now the National Rally?
Mm-hmm.
National Rally Party. She was she and the party were found guilty of embezzlement. Embezzlement. and she is. Did she get a 4-year jail term and also a 5-year ban on running for office, or have I reversed those?
No, that's correct.
Well, I think that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
She can appeal.
Yes. What do we think?
I like when she stormed out of the courtroom and all she said was incroyable. Which basically, for people who don't speak French, means like, you got to be fucking kidding me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if she embezzled or not. There does seem to be, however, a pattern, let's just say in NATO countries now, of arresting your main political rival. I don't know if this was going to be Marine Le Pen's time to shine, like 2027, which she was going to take her last
way
crack.
Ahead of the polls.
I mean, but this was the most recent parliamentary election was supposed to be a great victory for the rally, and they were thwarted at the last minute by some clever and impassioned ballot jockeying, kind of like the coalition building among the center left and the true left.
Yes.
And then the center did what it always does to the left. It shivved them.
Yeah. Yes. So I don't know. I mean, I don't have any, there's no love lost, for Marine Le Pen here. I wouldn't doubt, but what do we make of this verdict?
Look, I'm a for whatever it's worth, I'm a dual national. I'm a citizen of France. This is a major problem. She's not just a candidate. I mean, she represents a long-standing strain that goes back decades to her father. It really actually goes all the way back to Vichy, to the part that was really not settled after World War II. And this strain in French politics has been patiently waiting for a restoration that they were about to receive in just 2 years. And now this court has just single-handedly said to 1/3 of all French voters, and we're talking about a country that has like 30 parties, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you have 34% of the vote, you're going to win. And they've just been disenfranchised. French people don't take shit like this lying down, whether they're on the right or on the left. Things are going to break. Things are going to be possibly violent. We're entering a frightening period for French politics. It takes I'll hand it to the court. They've got some balls, but I mean, it was like really, and people in the center are saying this is an appropriate, sanction for someone in her position. But the fact is, again, I'm a creature of the left. I would never vote for someone or consider voting for Marine Le Pen. But for me, I think it's always, you've got to be nervous when you take out you kneecap the top running candidate, someone who was almost certainly going to win, who represents a political movement that's been playing by the rules and waiting for their chance. And now it's like, it looks like a trick. It feels like a coup. And when Viktor Orban, of all people, is accusing France of not being democratic enough, you've got a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'll, put any weight behind his criticism.
Yeah,
I think it's a serious fucking problem, though.
Yeah, I mean, did they embezzle? like, what's this? That's always a question. I mean, it's like
they use their party as a personal piggy bank, which a lot of people do.
I mean, I guess that's the question, right? Is this another example of, well, who doesn't do that? And then it is purely political. Also, if you're looking to the United States as an example, it didn't work. So
the lawfare?
Yeah, it didn't work. Trump's back.
Yeah.
Well, baby. I mean, I'm sure the French are like, we're doing what you should have done.
Yeah.
You should, send him to. You should have sent him to jail. Made it illegal for him to run.
They didn't. They didn't get things moving fast enough. We also haven't talked about Turkey arresting the mayor of Istanbul, who was going to be Erdogan's major, the major risk for him.
Yeah, and this is what Erdogan does. He's an anti-democrat. He's a fascist. He wants to be president of Turkey forever. And anybody who could possibly pose a threat is arrested, whether you're a politician or a general or a professor or a member of the parliament, you're under arrest. And that's the end of it.
You know, and they say Ukraine's too corrupt for NATO.
Yeah.
But Turkey's not a member yet.
The problem is, no, Turkey's in NATO.
Oh,
not
NATO,
in the
right,
European
not the
Union.
EU.
Yeah, not the EU.
The problem, though, is when the NATO Charter was drafted in 1947, it never occurred to anybody that they should write provisions for throwing a country out of NATO. And so there is no mechanism by which a country can be thrown out.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Even if like one member attacked another, which by the way could happen now.
Probably has happened in Syria. Let's be real. Like probably this has already happened.
No, Greece and Turkey every year are on the brink of war. And Turkey invaded and occupied Cyprus. Cyprus, of course, isn't a member of NATO, but it's pretty darn close. Mm-hmm. And then, everybody's like, oh, now what do we do? Oh my gosh, let's try and do diplomacy. That only works, so long.
I mean, the US is threatening to attack Denmark in Greenland.
Yeah.
So that would be a NATO self-conflict.
Yes.
Oh,
Vance just went to Greenland. Apparently made lots of friends. Not really.
Oh, yeah. Everybody loves him. He's a charmer. That guy.
How long before Usha divorces him?
I
we
know,
should have
right?
a betting pool.
I said from the beginning, she should have been the vice presidential nominee.
Oh, yeah.
She's way smarter than he is.
I guess we don't know that much. Who knows? Maybe she's all in. Maybe she thinks it's great. Maybe she thinks this is all terrific. She's trying to rebel against her parents because I think wasn't her mom a sort of architect of DEI programs at a major university?
Oh boy,
I seem to recall this.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, maybe she's just in a.
Well, remember JD? He's quite flexible himself, right? He was like, I'm a liberal. I just know how to talk hick.
Yeah, God, yeah. All right.
As an Ohioan, he drives me insane. I'm like, I had more grounds to go and run for governor of Ohio than he did.
Well, now you're going to have Ramaswamy.
Yes.
Vivek, isn't he going to be running for governor?
Oh yeah, he's running.
Yeah, his chances of winning are 0.
Well, we'll see. But yes, I agree with you. All right. I think we got to get out of here, guys.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
It was nice. Hey, it was nice to see everybody in the chat. That was cool.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
That was fun. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. But there will be more. That's the deprogramming for today, but we'll have more. Bye.